true church, false church, real church, ape church. All of you have been struggling with this crisis. You've been struggling with the crisis, what it actually means, what side to side with, where to go for mass, where to take your family, what to trust, who to trust, your most beloved with. Tonight, we have a very special episode with a very special host tonight. It's not going to be myself. I've been taking the lead on many of these episodes on unspoken issues here on Restless Heart Media. But tonight, we've been actually, you all have heard on many podcasts here on Unspoken Issues, but also on Bishop Miko's something about McReligion. Escaping
Escaping.
McReligion. There we go. About Lord of the World and how basically this book by Benson. I don't remember. He has 3 names. I don't remember all 3 of them.
Monsignor Hugh Benson.
Monsignor Hugh Benson. So you remembered at least 2 of them, but he has 3. So one more than me. Anyway, about how this book essentially predicted the crisis in which we're living, and ironically, how Pope Benedict XVI and Pope Francis recommended this very book to all of us, their faithful, their flock, to understand the church in these times. And ironically, maybe both of them suggesting that the true church was on the opposite side. So Father Stephen Lafort, who is going to be our host tonight, has been reading this book and has therefore a little insight about what this book kind of can share with us, what insight it can give us about how to navigate through these times.
Very good. Thank you, Father Martin. Well, I want to introduce Lord of the World to you. This was written by Father Robert Hugh Benson. This was endorsed by Benedict XVI and Francis I, very ominously as the book characterizing our times more than any other book and more influential in their formation than any other work of literature. Lord of the World is the very first apocalyptic literature ever to exist. So before there was COVID 1984, before there was George Orwell's 1984, before there was War of the Worlds, before there was Ayn Rand's Brave New World, or so on and so forth. What there was Lord of the World. So this was written in 1908. Imagine a book written in 1908 that it predicted assisted suicide, that predicted a pope, but no one knew who the pope actually was, and then predicted that there were clergy operating as their own jurisdiction with the blessing of that secret pope, saving souls as much as possible. They're martyrs of the Catholic faith. There are no more Protestants in the world. There are only Catholics. There are 3 religions that are left in the world. There are Catholics. Those are they're lapsed Catholics and lapsed Protestants. They end up becoming global paganists. They join a global paganist religion, and also known as the New World Order, New World Religion. Think of the Abrahamic houses of faith that were started by Francis I. Also, and you have this third group of religions of the Eastern religions, basically comprising of Islam and the other Eastern religions, and it's grouped as the Eastern religions. So basically, you have pagans who don't even know what's going on. You have the Western pagan apostasy of the globalist new pagan religion, and then you have Catholicism, and as we would know, traditional Catholicism today. And basically, this book predicts all of this. Father Robert Hugh Benson was a convert to the Catholic faith. He said that in the end, no one will be Protestant anymore because Protestantism is self-defeating. It's sentimentality, it's emotionalism. It's not a rock that you can build the faith on and build life upon and certainty on. And so any sincere Protestant will become a Catholic, and any sincere Catholic will become a traditional Catholic. Now, he doesn't say it exactly like that because there's no such thing as traditional Catholicism in 1908. It's just Catholicism. But basically, there are a few places in the world. There's Ireland, there's Rome, and that's laughable today because actually it's not Rome. And then there's a few places in pockets in America, he says, and then a few spatterings of the East and on the West in Europe, where the Catholic faith is still in existence today. And he predicts, actually, the book is written as if it were to be 50 years from the year 1908. So it's like 1958, actually. And he's predicting in the future, maybe 100 years from 1958. I'm sorry, from 100 years from 1908. So maybe 2008. Between 1958 and 2008 is the setting of this book. And in it, he talks about the this priest, Father Percy, an English priest, who goes into um, going to Rome, and the Pope is dying, and he bequeaths the papacy and says, "I want you to be the next Pope." So you have this Englishman, this English Franciscan priest named Father Percy, who ends up becoming the last pope. He takes the name Sylvester because Sylvester was the pope's name that took in Constantine the Great. So we started the Holy Roman Empire, Catholic faith, with Sylvester, and we're ending all of the world with Sylvester. So that's the papal name that he chooses. He ends up going to Nazareth, and as the Antichrist forces uh, begin to descend upon him, he does have 12 cardinals left, and they have Eucharistic procession, and the world is ending very soon. And so the world forces are going to destroy the papacy. They're going to destroy the cardinals. They're going to destroy what's left of the visible hierarchy of the church, even though it's very much a remnant and hidden. And then once that death comes, Christ comes and ends the world. So the book Lord of the World is about the Antichrist coming over, and very fascinating. People that think that man is the measure of all things, that everything is not God centered, but man centered. Man is God, and our Lord Jesus Christ was just to this global paganist religion. He was a great teacher and a sage, but he was not God. And he didn't come to teach us about God. He came to teach us a way, but it was really self-enlightenment. And it leads to suicide. And it actually has a story of an assisted suicide. Imagine in 1908, you actually have a story of an assisted suicide happening. And so he actually covers that in this book. But I do want to mention, and why is this relevant? Because I want to mention this one quote. So when Father Percy becomes Pope Sylvester, he starts an order called an Order of the Holy Cross. And these priests have to make a vow of poverty, chastity, obedience, and a fourth special vow of martyrdom. And I always thought growing up that it would be very important to convert as many souls possible to actually promote martyrdom. And that's the only way to convert a Muslim, the only way to convert a Jew, the only way to convert a pagan is to actually live a life that's worthy of martyrdom and to die for the faith. And Father Robert Hugh Benson writes as much in this book, which I found is fascinating. So I want to read you, if you oblige me. I want to read you. This is from page 222 and 223. The best way I can remember it is 223 is the universal. 5.56 is a good caliber for the military. It's a military caliber. 5.56, 223. So I'm personally a closet gun junkie. I love guns, and some guys are like, "Oh wow, Father, you actually." Yeah, I love guns, absolutely, 100%. And don't call me Father Weak Antelope. All right. So I want to read this excerpt here for you about this order of priests, and let me see, and I want you to see just how much it sounds like traditional Roman Catholic clergy today. Okay, this is written in 1908. The Pope, however, had the satisfaction of knowing that with incredible difficulty, a little progress had been made towards the reorganization of the hierarchy of all countries. Bishops were being consecrated freely. There were not less than 2,000 of them all told, and of priests an unknown number. The Order of Christ Crucified was doing excellent work, and the tales of not less than 400 martyrdoms had reached Nazareth during the last 2 months, accomplished mostly at the hands of the mobs. In other respects also, as well as in the primary object of the order's existence, namely the affording of an opportunity to all who loved God to dedicate themselves to him more perfectly, who love God and dedicate themselves to him more perfectly. The new religious were doing good work. The more perilous tasks, the work of communication between prelates, missions to persons of suspected integrity, all the business, in fact, which was carried on now at the vital risk of the agent were entrusted solely to members of the order. Stringent instructions were issued from Nazareth that no bishop was to expose himself unnecessarily. Each was to regard himself as the heart of his diocese, to be protected at all costs, save that of Christian honor, of martyrdom. And in consequence, each had surrounded himself with a group of new religious men and women who, with extraordinary and generous obedience, undertook such dangerous tasks as they were capable of performing. It was plain enough by now that had it not been for the order, the church would have been little better than paralyzed under these new conditions. Extraordinary faculties were being issued in all directions. This is the key moment here. Every priest who belonged to the order received universal jurisdiction subject to the bishop, if any, of the diocese in which he might be. Mass might be said on any day of the year of the Five Wounds or of the Resurrection or of Our Lady. And all had the privilege of the portable altar, now permitted to be wood. Further ritual requirements were relaxed. Mass might be said with any decent vessels of any material capable of destruction, such as glass or china. Bread of any description might be used, and no vestments were obligatory except the thin thread that now represented the stole. Lights were non-essential. None need wear the clerical habit. The rosary, even without beads, was always permissible instead of the office. In this manner, priests were rendered capable of giving the sacraments and offering the holy sacrifice at the least possible risk to themselves. And these relaxations had already proved of enormous benefit in the European prisons, where by this time many thousands of Catholics were undergoing the penalty of being refused public worship. End quote. So that whole quote that I just gave for you from Lord of the World is describing how traditional priests have to offer masses in basements, how to offer masses in hotel lobbies, in people's houses, home altars. We don't always have the best tools to actually perform the sacraments of the church, but we do the best we can with what we have. Only relaxation of the church laws only for the sake of being able to offer valid sacraments licitly and providing for the sake of the salvation of souls to the greatest number of souls possible. So with that, I wanted to open it up because there, as a lens of discussion today, I want to cover where the old Roman Catholics fall into this story, because most people don't realize that the old Roman Catholics are the tip of the spear. They're the oldest traditional group. They're the traditional group of all the traditional groups. And half the people in traditional, outside of Archbishop Marcel Lefebvre and outside of Archbishop Tuke, the old Roman Catholics are by far where the valid orders come from in the traditional Catholic movement. So I wanted to turn it over to Bishop Meikle, especially because of what Pope Pius X had done to stifle the work of the old Roman Catholics in England, which is little known about. Many people don't know that Father Martin has his own opinions about being in 1938 or 1939.
Something, actually, a 1570, if I could be.
1570 Sede? Okay, yeah. So, a 1939 Sede, Father Martin is, okay? Pope Pius XII had a lot of problems with the liturgical changes, and but Bishop Meikle actually has a 1903 Sede with Bishop Pius X. And I'm just kidding. I'm kidding now. But I do want to open it up to that history of the old Roman Catholics, and also in the lens, the grander scheme of where we're at in the traditional movement, to give ourselves a historical context and lens to give more charity to each other. And also we can conclude with this ominous Pope Hildebrand. All right. Now I'll give it to you, Bishop Meikle.
Yeah, thank you, Father. So, there's a difference between being separated from Rome and being against Rome. So I'd say the first thing is that the See of Cairglau has never been against Rome. It's been waiting for Rome. And, so there's a long history of sort of canonical dispute, sort of where we came from. And basically, Old Roman Catholic is distinct from Old Catholic, and I would say it's the most common mistake you see on Twitter. Every once in a while, folks they're trying to use a pejorative. They'll say to Father Martin or myself, "Oh, you're old Catholic," in the 21st century term, we're not Old Catholic at all. So prior to say 1909 or so, there was all what we call Old Roman Catholics. It's the same as Old Catholic. After around 1909, there's a distinction, and the big distinction is that Old Romans accept, at least the See of Cariglau, and our understanding is that we accept all 20 doctrinal councils. So doctrinally, there's no difference between us, our Sede friends, or the other, even the recognized resist, the Pius X, that kind of thing, in terms of de fide doctrine. We're all united on that. So every once in a while, you get someone on Twitter that thinks they know us better than we know ourselves, and they'll accuse us of various things, which is just not true, or a misreading of history. And part of the problem is that, I guess we haven't been very proactive until somewhat recently about being online and telling our own story. We've sort of avoided some of the, the idea of being an internet priest. But see, the thing is, we hold the pre-1960 faith and its moral praxis. And as I mentioned, we accept Vatican I and the understanding, we accept papal infallibility and the universal jurisdiction of a Catholic Peter. So that's sort of where we stand. And again, how we, along with most other traditional groups, we all basically agree on most things, although in practice, there's not a lot of cooperation. Tradition is sort of where we find ourselves, as fragmented administratively or PR-wise for various reasons. So Cariglau, what is that? I mean, written, it looks like, or Cariglau is sometimes pronounced, is a basically, it's like Welsh for Gloucester, and it's a titular see. It's not a territorial diocese. So basically, Pius X, who I love so much, St. Pius X is actually the only saint I personally own. The rest of the churches, I personally own a first-class relic of St. Pius X. A friend of mine got me, had a sister who worked in the department that takes care of relics in Rome, and as a seminarian, I received first class relic of St. Pius X. And he's one of my favorite saints of the post-Reformation era. But one thing I do have a problem with him is that there was an Anglo-Catholic movement in England that wanted to be Catholic very badly. What happened was, of course, Henry VIII did his silly business, and there was a break. And you have what Americans know as Episcopalians, and the English know as Church of England, and Canadians know as Anglicans. They mean slightly different things in different parts of the world, but the term Anglican. But here's the thing. There was a segment of the Church of England in England that considered itself Anglo-Catholic. They prayed for the Pope. They used the Roman calendar. They used the Roman Missal. Sometimes they used the traditional Mass, but in the vernacular language. And they were not recognized by Rome, but there was no way to be recognized by Rome. When Henry VIII did his crazy business and broke from the church, all of these people were cut off. And what happened was there was no Catholic hierarchy allowed. It was illegal. So there was no Catholic hierarchy on the soil of England. Leo XIII, one of my favorite popes, decreed that Anglican orders were null and void. And this put the Anglo-Catholic community in an uproar. First of all, they were under the impression that they were valid priests, but now the Pope, whom they prayed to and mentioned in the canon, said they were not. And so the question is, what can they do? It's not as easy as just joining the Catholic Church as it is today. Well, even that, it's not so easy, but it wasn't easy for them at all, because there was no Catholic bishop in England. So but yet they wanted to be real priests, and they were horrified at the idea that their orders might not be valid. So to make a very long story short, they hatched a cunning plan that they would go to the Bishop of Utrecht. Now, the Bishop of Utrecht had a unique canonical dispute. A pope back in 1145, I believe it was, named Eugene III, gave Utrecht a special privilege that they could name their own bishops, and as long as they weren't heretics, essentially, that they were self-governing. And later church politics, There were canonical processes. Nothing was ever proven canonically. So at one point, Utrecht, they split them off. There was the old Catholic bishop, the former, in other words, the former, and the new Catholic bishop. Everybody thinks old Catholic or old Roman Catholic refers to tradition. It actually refers to that first break. So kind of like when Bishop Strickland was removed without proper process, had he refused to relinquish his see, Rome would have been forced to do the same thing, basically appoint a parallel bishop. Bishop Strickland decided to resign in favor of another Novus Ordo, even though he, from what I can understand, didn't have a proper process. But that's a story for another night. Now, what these guys decided to do, because Rome fully recognized the validity of Utrecht, and even quasi, they weren't considered bad guys. They were considered basically administratively distinct and maybe a little disobedient. So what happened was the Anglo-Catholics found a Catholic priest who had left ministry for, it's a very long story, but basically he had a pastor that was immoral, and he had permission to be removed from his charge, though he wasn't laicized. And they went over to Utrecht and basically just asked the then Archbishop Gull to just ordain these Anglicans, these Anglo-Catholics. And what happened was Gull said, I do not want to get involved in this church politics. I want nothing to do with you crazy people. I sympathize with you. I know you want to be Catholic, but you're just going to have to wait for Rome to establish a hierarchy. And then they basically implored upon him, come on, these poor guys, they're in a no man's zone. They don't know if their orders are valid. And Gull said, well, I'll tell you what I'll do. You decide amongst yourself who to consecrate. I'll make a bishop, and he'll go back to England, and he'll be in charge of the Anglo-Catholics. And so what happened was Gull consecrated a fellow named Arnold Harris Matthew. And Matthew ended up, a few short months later, coming back to Gull and saying, hey, I had 65 Anglo-Catholic priests. Now a bunch of them, Canterbury sort of won them back. They decided to get cold feet, and I don't want to run this. And please let me, dispense me of of this mission. And Gull said, no, I believe God willed this. So you're going to go and take care of what remains. And so that sort of started our particular segment. Now, so what happened though, in the meantime, is the Dutch decided to get really irritated with Rome, and they decided not to accept Vatican I. So that's where we now make this distinction between old Roman Catholic and old Catholic. The ones that decided they weren't going to follow Vatican I, we refer to now as old Catholic. And the ones that do follow Vatican I, in general, I mean, there's lots of groups that use the name and we have no control over it. But in general, the ones that would accept the universal jurisdiction of Peter's successor, were known as Old Romans. And so that's sort of where where it was. Now, I'm simplifying a lot of things because it would take us all night. But basically, Matthew's intent was to bring Anglo-Catholics into the church. It was not to cause increased discord. And he saw by using Utrecht as a way of making them Catholic without causing a diplomatic event. Well, it did cause a diplomatic event. And there was a series of open letters between the Archbishop of Canterbury and Matthew, and they were dueling in the newspaper. And basically, St. Pius X got involved, and he said, he sided with Canterbury. He just said, I don't need these guys running around, because he wanted to reestablish the hierarchy in Britain. So it was seen, he threw basically this group of Anglo-Catholics under the bus in order for what he perceived to be a greater good of establishing the Catholic hierarchy. Now, again, Matthew never rejected a single defined dogma, and neither did the old Catholics up until that point where there was that split. So there was a bishop that Matthew eventually consecrated. His name was Bernard Mary Williams. And he came up with this name Cairglau, which is, again, it means Gloucester, which is where Williams lived. And he took in Matthew and he said, hey, this will be the name of the titular see, applied it to Matthew and then also to himself. And Matthew spent his final years in William's household. And so they, basically in his latter years, Matthew lived a very ascetical life, and it was hurting his health. And at one point, he decided he was going to be like Anthony of Egypt and decided he was going to pray for the world, living like a hermit. And William said, well, you're not allowed to hurt yourself with this, so you come and live in my house. So there was Matthew, and then Bernard Mary Williams was the second Archbishop of Carriglou. And he's the theological ancestor of everything that we stand for today, although he did not consecrate a direct successor. So again, I don't want to get into too many weeds. But in 1925, Williams issued a new constitution explicitly seeking reunion with Rome as a uniate right. So that's what I want you guys to understand is that the brand of old Roman Catholicism that the See of Carriglou is that we want to be under our Catholic Peter. And so basically, Williams and his successor Shelley was not interested in creating an alternative church. So some old Romans do, but we do not want to create an alternative church at all. The closest parallel to a church structure that you guys might be familiar with is like a personal prelature or a group of clergy that are seeking to bring souls to our Lord Jesus in the Catholic faith, but that don't adhere to like a traditional diocesan structure per se. So the thing is that Williams never consecrated another bishop because he wanted to bring the whole group in complete union with Rome, and there wasn't technically a theological dispute. In fact, throughout the 20th century up until Vatican II, any disagreements we had between old Roman Catholicism and Rome, they were about just sort of basically canonical dispute over our status, and just sort of like they wanted to fight canonically that we had a case to exist. And as time went on, no one cared. Like the lay people couldn't care less about some dispute with the Dutch in Rome and also the Anglo-Catholics. Everybody forgot about why we existed. But Rome, both pre and post Vatican II, has acknowledged the validity of our orders, but some would call it schismatic. Others would just say, well, you're irregular. So Williams died in 1952. So Archbishop Shelley, who followed, he maintained our apostolic succession. And there are other groups that call themselves old Roman Catholic through what they call the Carfaro and the McKenna line. So Shelley inherited Williams' pro-Roman orientation. In fact, he moved the head of the see. He moved in Rome. And anecdotally, I have no proof. I have no letters. I can just tell you the stories that were told to me years ago that Shelley was friends with the Ottievani, and they used to walk in the afternoons together before their nap. And they, 4 or 5 times a week, they'd have a stroll together. And Ottievani, you might recall, was the head of doctrine for the church. When Vatican II came in, he was the one they shut the microphone off and laughed at for when he was trying to direct the council in a more traditional way. So, and then Archbishop Humphreys was consecrated by Archbishop Shelley in 1975, and he continued the same orientation. And he has a very interesting story, which, again, is beyond the scope of tonight. He deserves his own episode at some point. But he was even, so the relationship with us in Rome at this time was very interesting. In fact, Humphreys was even offered a job by the then, I guess, I don't know if he was a cardinal archbishop, but he was certainly an archbishop, Joseph Ratzinger. And also the first 2 bishops of St. Petersburg, where Humphreys resided, were sending us their Latin Mass attendees. Now that relationship doesn't exist anymore, but back in the day, it was that was the only place to get the traditional Mass. And because our group never spoke against the local bishop nor the Holy Father, it was considered kind of better than having them go off to the Orthodox. So that's an interesting part of history. And indeed, we didn't ever speak negatively against anyone in Rome until Francis. And then Francis was just kind of a bridge too far. Prior to Francis, we saw ourselves as basically a Catholic group with an administrative issue that would be sorted in the future. And under Benedict XVI, we had taken on the point of regularization very seriously. We had an Eastern bishop that was helping to assist in that matter. And basically it boils down to, that didn't work out. And when Francis came along, it was sort of a moot point. So Matthew established the see. Williams gave it its theological soul. Shelley preserved it and kept his headquarters in Rome and kept trying to, keep us close there. And Humphreys pursued its ultimate goal. And then now I bear the mission from Humphreys. So why are there so many other bishops? So the problem is Matthew consecrated a number of fellows, and they had very different theological opinions. And what's very confusing for you guys, if you do research on the internet, we have to just say you have to go by the bishop. It's kind of like, is Father James Martin the same kind of Catholic as Cardinal Burke? Well, no, they're very different, right? Yet they both have the name Catholic. Well, it's the same kind of thing with old Roman Catholics. So there are people that are old Roman Catholic, or say they're old Roman Catholic, that have very different views, as far different from Cardinal Burke as it is with James Martin. So the movement that produced Matthew to help the Anglo-Catholics also produced Archbishop Caffarra in America, and he was a very prolific consecrator. So there's a lot of bishops that came from him, and he consecrated bishops generously, and sometimes without adequate formation or proper governance, and that comes back to bite us on the wrong. And this produced a bunch of small competing jurisdictions. So many of these groups were entirely sincere. Some of them were very close to the Orthodox. They wanted to sort of be a bridge between, similar to some Anglo-Catholics, wanted to be this bridge between the West and the East. And, they all wanted to preserve the old faith. But sincerity is not the same as discipline. And there was some, again, there was a lot of, it was not a very well organized group as a whole. Father Martin likes to say that it's better to call old Romans to think of old Roman Catholics as a line of succession versus a distinct church, because we don't consider ourselves a separate church at all. We consider ourselves an element of the Catholic Church. So the Caraglau line is distinguished precisely by what it refused to do. We refuse to use canonical regularity for doctrinal innovation. There is, every once in a while, I hear someone calls us a heretic or something. Well, great, name it, because there is no heresy. We submit to the 20 doctrinal councils and de fide aspect and reject any innovation contrary. So anything that people will throw up and they'll say they don't like about us, they're not of a de fide nature. So before Francis, the main obstacle to union was the Mass and the faith that goes along with it. So Rome under Benedict XVI was moving towards a position that would have honored the old rite. And as a result, we thought we had a home again. And so I should mention an important part is in the 1950s, the clergy of the day under Shelley decided we don't need to be separate anymore. There's no theological difference. Why are we separate? Right? Like all the reasons why we are, no one cares about anymore, as far as our laity and most of our clergy, about these canonical disputes with the Dutch. They have nothing to do with us, really. So it was decided that we would just wrap up shop in the 50s. And we had 80 parishes at our height. And 2/3 of them left when we announced we were going to just die by attrition. We were going to retire by attrition and just not ordain anybody. We closed our seminary in Illinois. And basically, we were just going to go extinct. And then Vatican II happened, and Shelley decided, no, we have to protect the Mass. So doesn't that sound familiar? So we pre-exist all the other traditional movements. That's something that people don't realize. And some will say, oh, well, you guys are schismatic or whatever. No, well, our canonical situation was never properly resolved, and there was no tribunal that would hear it. So again, we're just trying to be obedient to our mission, be obedient to our Lord with that. And then when Vatican II happened, we had a new lease on life in the sense of a purpose to exist. And so we reopened our seminaries and started to ordain again. And we continue to, we have friends across various jurisdictions. In fact, myself and Father Martin, we've talked about in a previous episode, we're here because of a priest that worked for Ecclesia Dei of the Congregation of Doctrine of the Faith that investigated and this group and became friends with Archbishop Humphreys. And he said, these guys will never throw you under the bus. Now, how many clergy can say that, right? If any of Novus Ordo clergy are watching, you know what I'm talking about. We'll never be thrown under the bus here. And just to be to hold and celebrate and live the Catholic faith. So so Francis sort of peed in the pool, all right? And the thing is, we have Sede friends, we have non-Sede friends, we recognize and resist friends, we have Novus Ordo friends. We're all going to look at the Francis phenomena differently, but I think we'll all agree that Francis was a great chapter change. In 2,000 years of church history, Francis was a chapter, at the end of a chapter and the beginning of another. So, you know, when you think about it, when Benedict tried to heal the rift between old and new faith, and then along came Francis in 2021 with Traditionis Custodes, he slammed that door shut. So under Francis, the horizon for a reunion receded. And not because we moved, but because Rome moved. It moved in a more synodal direction, which we can't abide. And this is the present position of Caraglau, that we neither recognize nor definitively reject Leo XIV. We watch and we pray and we maintain the faith intact. When an unambiguously Catholic Pope emerges, we have something worth bringing to him. And so we're not Sede Vacanus, although some of our clergy tend that way. But the fact of the matter is that we it's just above our pay grade is our official position. We hold that we don't know about the status of Leo and Francis with intellectual honesty. We're not schismatics in the theological sense. So according to the 1983 code, we're schismatic. All right. According to Dominus Jesus of the Post-Conciliar Church, number 17, you can look it up on the Vatican website, is that any church that holds valid succession is part of the one true Church of Christ. So that's what the theological document says, but the canon law says that we're not. So again, we have this debate on Twitter all the time. We are not building a permanent alternative. We are preserving the deposit of faith while the storm passes. We are small. We don't have any great ambition to be huge. What we offer is not numbers, but fidelity. We consider ourselves friends with every traditional priest and layperson, whether you're in the Novus Ordo, whether you're Pius X, whether you're a Sede Vacanus, a lot of these questions are above our pay grade, and a future Catholic Pope and our Lord himself will sort this out. But we try as best as possible. I mean, we'll defend ourselves if we're attacked, but we try as best as possible never to criticize other traditional groups. And the reason being is that we think that any group that is trying to work with us for the restoration is it's a worthy mission. And even if we disagree in details, we lament the disagreements that traditionals have with one another, and also sometimes squabbling over benefactors and the like, or worrying about theological details that are really best left for a future pope to solve. So basically, to close out and then turn over to Father Martin and back to Father Lefort, we exist to guard the deposit of faith. And when that moment comes, to lay it at the feet of a Catholic Peter. And basically, you can, like I say, we are not against Rome. We are waiting for Rome to return to itself. So I encourage you to, we're doing a joint show. We do it once a month, and I hope you tune in every month. But also, Father Lefort has his channel, and Father Navarro, Father Martin, and myself. And again, we have 3 slightly different presentations on things, but you're welcome to follow us on social media and our other YouTube channels. And if there's any questions that we get to in the comments, we'll try, but I'll turn it over to Father Martin.
Yeah, this is kind of a weird show tonight. I don't know.
2 monologues and then commentary.
We've had like our I guess our 3 different segments, and I don't really have a segment prepared. See, we come into this, you had this idea of unspoken issues of all these, unspoken issues of trad movement, and there's many, but at the same time, like we don't want to create enemies unnecessarily. I mean, that's just the way we are. We just sure, we hear rumors, we hear problems, all that kind of stuff. We want to talk about them and to educate the laity, like what the real situation is for the trad movement, because the mainstream trad news outlets don't give you the real thing. All they ever do is complain, or they blow up something so incredibly big for us all to realize that it was nothing. Like one thing that really, I'll never forget it. So I'm sitting here in Florida, right? And I see a tweet one day that's like, the Reverend Mass that shook Florida.
Oh,
The Reverend Mass that shook Florida. And I'm like, Chewy, did you shake? Was there an earthquake here? Chewy, was there an earthquake? I didn't feel an earthquake. Was there something that shook? I didn't feel anything. And so, I mean, Chewy's over here like freaking out right now. So then I'm trying to this Reverend Mass that shook Florida. So apparently, like Bishop Strickland and Father James Altman were in Florida for some sort of just kind of talk that they gave in a parish hall, but it was of a Maronite Catholic church, a parish, so it was of an Eastern Rite. And so the Eastern Catholic bishop gave them permission to offer liturgy or mass, whatever, in his church. And so Bishop Strickland offered it versus populum, so towards the people, just like a Novus Ordo mass. And Father Altman concelebrated as well as other priests. And the music was two guys, one playing the acoustic guitar, and the other one playing the harmonica. And I was like, on what grounds is this a reverent mass? And on what grounds does this news outlet say that it shook Florida? And, you know, these news outlets are the ones that gatekeep us.
Yep.
This is my issue. So many people depend to receive their news, to receive their opinions from these professional news outlets, from laity that don't know their left hand from their right hand regarding Catholic theology, Catholic spirituality. They hold a rosary up. And they want, therefore, for you to listen to them regarding them and how to pursue this crisis in the church because they have a rosary in their hand. Guys, look at I have breviaries, a whole stack of breviaries. They can't even afford these stuff. They wouldn't even bother because they don't have the time or the will to even pray the entire pre-55 divine office. Drop your rosary, journalist. Pray the pre-55 breviary from start to finish. For crying out loud. I mean, this is the kind of stuff I feel I'm dealing with. Is like what we need at the front of the battle, leading the charge, our clergy of prayer. Instead, we have lay people in cheesy ties. Well, I mean, at least they have ties, right? But in cheesy ties, all they have is a rosary. Like, I mean, a rosary is good, but that's all you got. Come on, full office, or stop pretending that you have to lead me. Okay, stop pretending you have to lead Father Lefort. Stop pretending you have to lead Archbishop Meikle. Stop. If all you got is a rosary, submit. This is my issue with traditional Catholic media today, is that they are gatekeepers that have no right to the job, to the profession that they have on their own volition taken upon themselves. And they will have to face this on the judgment day. Father Lefort, you look like you have something to say. Let me turn it over to you.
The major question in all of this, Father Martin and Bishop Meikle, is who do we report to? Who do we have to report to in order to be validated to actually be considered Catholic? Who is the authority to actually say, you know, are these news outlets, are these dads with webcams, are these opinion makers that say that, hey, look, I have the Catholic faith and I go to the SSPX and this is my opinion on this, and so this is the way it is. Well, it's just an opinion. It's not the actual authority of the church. There is, who do we report to? In fact, and there was another Sede priest I was talking to about our See of Cairglau. And I asked him, I said, why is it that I send somebody to you in good faith to receive the sacraments, to go to Mass, and you have to tell him, oh, well, we're schismatic and we're not Catholic? Well, okay. So I talked to the priest. I said, well, how do we remedy that? How do I remedy my bishop talking to your bishop, saying, okay, we can be received back into the church, when his bishop was a group of lay people that decided to get old Roman Catholic holy orders, and who were schismatic, the same holy orders that we have. And so do we report to him? And so he said, oh no, he's too busy. He's too busy to report it to receive us into the church. So the question is, where do we go to be received into the church if we already profess the Catholic faith, practice the Catholic sacraments, and have legitimate apostolic succession that has the same? So where do we report to? That's the question. So the magazine outlets, the news outlets, where do we report to? Since you're the gatekeepers, we want to be Catholic. Who do we report to? Who has the authority? That's the question. Right. That's the real question. Absolutely. And when we report to you, can you give us something more than just a rosary when we have the whole deposit of faith to talk about?
Yeah, absolutely. The thing is that I get, why various groups, everybody's trying to do what they can to restore the faith. And so perhaps I give them a little more slack than you two in some respects. But one thing I think we can agree on is all these lay commentators should clearly indicate which bishop they're under. Because if there's an issue, if they're not with the mind of the church, then I, as a bishop, should be able to contact their bishop. Mm. So the thing is, and likewise, if Father Martin or Father Lefort run afoul of one of these guys that's a bishop in the greater Catholic family, they have an issue, they should be able to contact me. And what's going on instead is there's a lot of poo hurling and people assuming the role of gatekeeper that don't have the authority. And I think that's something that all three of us definitely agree on. And I do believe that these lay commentators, it's one thing if you're just aggregating news, but if you're actually providing interpretation of the faith, as Catholic men, we believe in the three munera that come with holy orders. So if you either say that doesn't mean anything, or that you are your own authority above your own bishop. So they should plainly indicate who they're with. And then I would just say to fellow bishops that, we have to be better for the sake of souls to communicate better. And that doesn't mean that we all have to have these formal proclamations, we recognize the communion of and all this business, but rather just from priest to priest, bishop to bishop, that there's a line of communication. And if someone has a dispute, then that's settled openly. Because unfortunately, what sometimes happens is people smile at your face and they greet you nicely, and then behind your back, or as soon as there's a shared benefactor that presents, the knives come out. And gentlemen, that's not of God. So we believe in front stabbing as Catholic gentlemen, not backstabbing. So that's and we're going to have our honest differences until a Catholic Peter can sort us out. We're going to have our differences, and we're just going to have to agree to disagree. The question is, do you know what happens if we don't settle this amongst ourselves, the Catholic media and the various communities of tradition? What's going to happen is we're only going to drive people to the Orthodox. That's what's going to happen. You're going to drive people either home or to the Orthodox. So that lies on the soul of these people that are naming themselves gatekeepers, and preventing people from peacefully coming to the sacraments that are provided.
Yes, Your Excellency, there is, speaking of needing to become public of who you're underneath, there is a movement in the last 6 months or so of a certain Pope Hildebrand in Rome. And I know you're laughing, but 2 weeks ago when I found out about this, I asked somebody. So I follow in Substack, a number of people. There's a guy I follow. His name is John Maya from Remnant Guard. All right. And he was giving this question about what is the Pope Hildebrand question? And I thought, well, is this a theory or is this a real person? So I inquired, and he ended up turning out to be a real person. So it turns out that after Leo the 14th's election, Brother Bagnolo of Italy in Rome decided to gather the Church of Rome to elect a different Roman pontiff that would be Catholic. And they elected a man who took the name Pope Hildebrand. And supposedly he's been ruling and governing with jurisdiction the Catholic Church for the last 6 months or so. And the big question is, what's his baptismal name? And who are the electors? This is a public thing. It's a matter of salvation to know who the Roman pontiff is. I want to know in good faith. I'm not trying to be mocking or anything like that. If this guy is actually, we have a case to make this, to say, okay, this guy is actually the Catholic Pope. Well, I want to submit. We should all want to submit. But the thing is, this is a matter of salvation. This has to be public. So when it comes, the same spirit of all these commentators and gatekeepers, imagine if the guy with the webcam would say, I am underneath the bishop of my diocese, and then the bishop of the diocese has to oversee everything he says.
Right. And that's the point.
And
because these guys
he would be
whatever they
muted.
want.
He would be zip it.
Right. But what does that tell you? Like, if the truth is silenced by this authority, that's exactly what I'm trying to push.
Right.
I know exactly what I'm asking of these guys. I want them to understand they can't have it both ways. They can't sound like us. Like some of these gatekeepers, if they were in our living room, darn well, they'd agree with everything we believe. They almost 100%, but they'll get on air and they won't admit the friendship, or they won't admit the situation because they don't want to hurt their benefactors. They don't want to hurt their esteem amongst certain other factions. But the thing is that at some point you have to take a stand. Mm-hmm. And my thing is, like, how many people are claiming to be Pope now? There's got to be like 4 or 5, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, they're not mainstream news, but I couldn't even list. I mean,
there's one in the Philippines, even, right?
Michael II or something, right? And there's all these guys. And I mean, our situation is, come on, man. Like, we're just like, what is this? We're gonna gather our household pets together and have a vote on, and then Father Lefort has a treat in his pocket and he's elected Pope. I mean, I'm being silly, but God's gonna have to fix this problem in the church.
If we need if we're going to have universal peaceful acceptance, we have to have.
And I love what you say, though. I mean, if these guys are going to make this claim, then why are all the electors secret? Why all this? This just sounds to me like someone's pulling everybody's chain. I think they're pulling everyone's chain because, of course, Bishop Waugh, and you guys know more about it than me, but Bishop Waugh's, intent to have an imperfect council. And it sort of feeds into, I think that, people are raising some interest in that, and then what's going on. And then, of course, this guy jumps the gun and is.
On the contrary, it destroyed any possible unity, but amongst all the states, right. Like they were working, creepy crawling towards some sort of unity, trying to find any little ounce of unity they had, and this actually blew it all up.
Blew it all up.
And
see, I don't understand
unity among the cities anymore.
I want to ask you two guys, and anyone in the audience that also wants to weigh in on this question: is it that unreasonable to hold as a definition of Catholic adherence to the 20 doctrinal councils in de fide aspect, excluding any innovation contrary? That is a big tent. That takes in sedes, that takes in recognize and resist, that takes in novus ordo that are conservative. That to me is the best definition I've come up with. And I'm open to criticism or correction on that, but what's wrong with just saying, let's adhere to that and then wait for a Catholic Peter that we all can acknowledge? And how do we measure that Catholic Peter? Does he hold to that same definition? Right? So synodality disqualifies you. So if you believe in synodality, that's an innovation contrary.
I mean, I don't know. I really don't know if the Sadists in all their aspects are Catholic in the sense that they really don't care about unity. I mean, one holy, Catholic, and apostolic. These are the 4 marks, and they really don't care about one. All they care about, these individual bishops care about is themselves, and so that is yet to be seen. Is that they actually desire to be one? If they display a desire to be one, they display a desire to be Catholic. If they don't display a desire to be one, then they display a desire to be non-Catholic. And so if their desire to be one is simply be, Bishop Sanborn was saying everybody under me, okay, then we're white Catholic then, Bishop Sanborn.
Yeah, well,
If
the
that's your
problem is with
definition of
these
one.
guys too. They'll say, "Oh, well, you're not Catholic, you're not one of us," but then they don't make any effort. If they truly believe that, then where's their charity? Where's their Father Martin? I really think you're with the wrong group, and I think me might be putting your soul at danger. Let's regularize you with us, or let's you. But they don't even offer. They just throw at this business that everybody's group is has gotten the golden plates or something. And it's absolutely ridiculous because it's above our pay grade. We don't claim to be the only Catholics. We're co-workers with
Listen,
all of the groups.
I've been flaming the thesis since 2020, and no one really cared. That's why people have been making fun of me of being a 1939 Sede. I pointed out all the errors of the thesis.
Yeah.
It says, well, if the thesis is wrong, then Pope Pius XII wasn't ever Pope. And I said, that's your deduction, not mine.
See, that's why Sedes like me more than Father Martin, because I don't.
But that's a joke of me being a 1939 Sede. Is that I knocked the thesis. I disproved it. Like, well, then Pius can't be Pope. And I'm like,
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it underlines, guys, these are serious, complicated questions, and we have to have a zeal for souls, and we have to work together for restoration, not silo into our various factions, and just, you don't have to agree with somebody to at least have a conversation with them. So that's kind of the mess that we've got ourselves into, and that again, a future Peter's going to have to sort it out, I think.
You know what? I'll put this out there too. And then before you want to say something before you lose your thought. I think Sanborn's priests need to prove that they have a good human formation, that they're normal human beings, and they can have a normal conversation. I don't think they could do it. What do you think?
Charity in all things. And if I have faith to move mountains, but have not charity, I am a resounding gong and a clashing cymbal.
Well, maybe we should have an open invitation that any other faction that wants to
come to dinner with us. Come to dinner with us.
Yeah, that's true.
Come to dinner with us. We'll have dinner.
We actually have a regular clergy night that we invite anybody across jurisdiction to yeah.
So yeah, that's right. Every second Thursday of the month in St. Petersburg, if you want to come to the old Roman Catholic Seminary of St. Thomas Aquinas, you're welcome to come and hang out.
Let us know first.
If you're clergy,
don't just show up.
Clergy.
Yeah,
right? It's for clergy.
Not Anglican or anything like that or anything.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, but I think those actually, these clergy nights are very helpful for me.
I said not Anglican. Anyway, follow the floor.
That's very good. Yeah, I agree with you. So I think these clergy nights are very good for me. I come in a day in advance so that we can do this show, and it's always good to have camaraderie and to share notes and battle stories, glory stories, and know that you're not alone in the battlefield. I know that's a big SSPX term. We're on the battlefield. We're on the battlefield. We're on the battlefield. Well, guess what? Some of us, we actually have parishes, and we're at that parish every single day. And we don't go in just on weekends. We actually do it Monday through Saturday, Sunday to Sunday. We don't just come in, sweeping in as heroes on the weekends. We actually have to do it every day of the week in our parishes. And so anyway, we're pastors. Okay, this is something that can wear you out if you're not careful, and it's also good to have support. And it's good to know that whenever brother priests are in the area, that hey, look, let's get a bite to eat, let's talk, let's go to confession, let's see how we can support one another. That's all very essential to the life of a priest. And there are so many different traditional Catholic clergy in the south of Florida, and very few of us actually talk to each other. And that blows me away. It blows me away. I know of at least a dozen priests or more in the country that I can talk to at any time. I can get on the phone and talk to them. And there are about a dozen priests in South Florida from Orlando on down. And it's only a handful. Who can you talk to other than your own group?
Mm-hmm.
So, if we don't have charity, we can have faith to move mountains, but we're still a resounding gong and a clashing cymbal. So charity has to be the bond of perfection. That's it. And that's the desire of the good of the other. And if we desire the good, we desire God, we desire the salvation of souls. And that has to be primary. It's not about, oh, we're right and you're wrong. And so our rightness makes us more zealous for souls. Well, okay, prove it to me, convert me, reach out to me and say, hey, look, we need to look at this avenue. Well, I mean, I have my own perspectives, and like, let's listen to what I had to say. I've done research too, so let's share our research about what we've uncovered that we didn't learn in our Novus Ordo seminaries, or we didn't learn in our first 30 years or 40 years or 50 years or 80 years of being a Catholic, that now we know because we uncovered the documents of the faith. So, that's, dare I say, dialogue.
Your Excellency, any last words before we wrap up this episode of Unspoken Issues?
Other than just thank you to the viewers who are part of this restoration, that despite we may have some differences in detail, I think we all realize that this era is very special. I mean, God chose you to live in this era, to bear his light to a world that no longer believes. And, praise God for your holy gift of faith, and for you saying yes to this, because there's lots of work to be done. And God's going to do great things. I pray and I hope, and we're going to live to see this restoration come to be in our lifetime. I hope so. And if not, well, we're going to buckle down and get ready for the next chapter. And again, bear his light to the world that no longer believes. God bless you.
Thank you all for tuning in for another episode of Unspoken Issues, our monthly episode with Father LaFour, Archbishop Meikle, and myself here on Restless Heart Media. This Friday, we have yet another episode of Friday Night Leisure, where we're online live, Alberto and I, to answer any questions you could possibly have about the Catholic faith, regarding family life, spiritual life, anything. You just drop the questions in the chat, and we're just here, presenting ourselves to answer whatever questions you have, just to engage with the chat. So we will see you then on another episode of Friday Night Live. Thank you for joining us tonight on Unspoken Issues. We will see you back again next month. God bless.